So this was Tom Brady going on Stephen A. Smith. Who, by the way, it's been a great week for Stephen A. Smith in terms of viral moments because he just went viral for the cars thing, which is amazing. But this was him talking about the league, and I have some like interesting thoughts about this, especially who it's coming from. So go ahead, Perna.
I've never agreed with Tom so much in my life.
And he's not talking
I think there's a lot of mediocrity in today's NFL. Yeah. I don't see the excellence that I saw in the past.
Why not?
And
why not?
I think the coaching isn't as good as it was. I don't think the development of young players is as good as it was. The rules have allowed a lot of bad habits to get into the actual performance of the game. Mm-hmm. So I just think the product, in my opinion, is less than what it's been. I look at a lot of players like Ray Lewis and Rodney Harrison and Ronnie Lott and guys that impacted the game in a certain way. And every hit they would have made would have been a penalty. You hear coaches complaining about
Kareem Jackson,
their own player being tackled, and not necessarily, why don't they talk to their player about how to protect himself? We used to work on the fundamentals of those things all the time. Now they're trying to be regulated all the time. Offensive players need to protect themselves.
Remember when we talked about the Patriots receivers going down before they took hits with that Odell Beckham Jr. thing? Dang, was I right about that?
It's not up to a defensive player to protect the offensive player. A defensive player needs to protect himself. I didn't throw the ball to certain areas because I was afraid players were going to get knocked out. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. Wow. I didn't throw it to the middle when I played Ray Lewis because you knock him out of the game, and I couldn't afford to lose a good player. I think there's a lot of mediocrity.
Okay. Let's talk about that because I have so many thoughts about that. Because what Brady is saying, I completely 1,000,000% agree. Like everything that he said, I was like, yep. I think in terms about how the game has changed, it is night and day from like the Brady era and now in terms of hitting players. And some of that has been given up in the name of safety, which I don't disagree with, right? Because like there's some that is like, okay, like, yeah, like that was an unnecessary hit, what have you. You want to make sure that everybody's safe because when you don't have like star players playing, it hurts the brand, it hurts the NFL, and nobody wants to watch that garbage, right? People don't want to watch the Bengals without Joe Burrow.
How did Joe Burrow get hurt?
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Hand down on the ground.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's nothing it's nobody's fault. The thing, though, that kind of peeves me a little bit is like Brady kind of doing some revisionist history and just be like, getting regulated. My dude, if he got touched, he was the first one complaining to the refs. He was the one being upset. Because, like, we could talk about, like, Patrick Mahomes, because you even tweeted about this on that roughing the passer, and he's turning to the ref to try and get the penalty, right? That Brady was also the guy who did that. So, like, I just want to be like, okay, I agree with everything you're saying, but let's also not pretend that you weren't the first one to run to the zebras and be like, hey, he hit me, right? And so I think that's the only thing that bothers me, but I think he's 100% correct. Because I think it's on the quarterback specifically, but it's on offensive players to make sure that they can defend themselves. The only reason they're in a defenseless position is because they ran a route, right? There's a defender that's close, and the QB made an active decision to throw that ball to that receiver.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think the other issue is like the players negotiated less practice time and those sorts of things in the collective bargaining agreement. So
I hate it.
That part that he's criticizing, that comes from the players.
Yeah.
But the NFL, year after year, trying to regulate how hits happen on the field is becoming more and more of an issue. And this season, maybe it's closer because we're watching Kareem Jackson get singled out for hitting hard. And to me, it makes the game less interesting, right?
Sure.
Nobody wants to see helmet-to-helmet hits. We're not advocating for that to be in the game.
Yep.
Brady's ACL injury literally changed how quarterbacks could be tackled by defenders. You cannot go low to tackle a quarterback. And a lot of times, quarterbacks are in a defenseless position in those situations, which is why they've taken it out.
Aaron Rodgers made the falling rule.
You can't fall on
Anthony Barr fell on him and broke his collarbone.
Which is
that's a rule now.
Stupid. It's absolutely, that rule is so stupid to me. People watch football because there's risk there, because it is violent. And the NFL has like an identity crisis with trying to continue to make the game safe while taking out parts of the game that people like. And again, nobody's advocating for more injuries. Okay. We're all for making it as safe as you can, but while keeping what makes football a draw, and people play it for those reasons. Players understand the risks. And I think Tom Brady's just saying something that a lot of people think and believe. And we've seen J.J. Watt tweeting so much this year about bad penalties related to defenses getting dinged for hits that aren't egregious. And it's like, I get it. If it's somebody doing dirty hits over and over again and you got to make a statement, fine. But like, and the change has happened just in a couple years too, because with Kareem Jackson specifically, people have been bringing up like his hit that he had against DeAndre Hopkins and his return game as a Denver Bronco going into Houston. He lights up DeAndre Hopkins. Everybody's like, he couldn't make that hit now. And that was just a couple years ago.
Well, and that's so because people have been asked about Kareem Jackson, because to that point, the reason why this suspension got upheld, and I knew it was going to get upheld, is because like now there's a history for this season. And now that like the microscope is like on him being like, listen, we're watching everything, your magnifying glass, I should say, is on him. Like any hit that you do that looks anywhere near egregious, like there's going to be consequences for it.
Yeah.
So I think it's so fascinating because we're talking about how defense has changed the game this year, because you see it in the quality of the offensive play. And like, again, quarterbacks have been not so great this year, but the defenses have found a way to play defense without doing that. You know, like without like the hard hitting. And I think maybe you could argue the quality of the product is not as good then, because it's not necessary. Like, do you think it's more like scheme rather than players now? Because I think like that does have
I think schemes have caught up to the offense.
Because you used to have the players that he mentioned, because you go, oh, those guys wreck games because you knew they're going to knock your head off. They're going to hit you, right? Like they are going to be, they're going to change it in a way of like, I'm not going to target that side of the field. Yeah. And I feel like maybe there's not as many players like that nowadays. Like the ones I could think of off the top of my head, like on defense, like a Fred Warner, maybe, right? Like a Cam Chancellor. Like, you could think of guys like over the middle of like maybe, but it's been more of like Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner, I know you don't like Sauce Gardner because of the holds. But in terms of just toughness, aggressiveness, like you're not looking and be like, wow, he's going to take your head off. It's just like, no, he's a good corner.
Yeah. There's no enforcers anymore. Enforcers are gone.
The hip drop.
If I gotta agree with Brady, come on, guys. Ugh. Don't put me in that position, NFL. Don't put me in that position. But he said this before. He said this like 2 years ago with the Bucks.
Yes.
Or maybe it was last year before the Tampa season. He basically said this verbatim in this like interview where he was with Mike Evans and I forget who else was there, but you know, it is what it is.
I think we talked about this on GPS, I think on Friday. I think they're going to attempt to regulate it. I don't know how successful they are going to be. So, I mean, if they could do it in things like rugby, then yeah, but...
Oh, the hip drop?
Yeah, the NFL, I think it's going to be messy how they try and enforce that.
It's tough because I don't think what Logan Wilson did was egregious.
Nope.
But then if you saw what happened to the Florida quarterback, the Florida State quarterback, I think that was egregious. And that's like it shows like the worst case of what that tackle is. So that one's like a tricky one.